Welcome to the Gallery and Hurley Unfiltered podcast, Iowa Football Rewind.
Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast player to get a behind-the-scenes look that you won't find anywhere else.
I didn't drink today, so this is me sober.
Okay.
That good or bad?
There's a dozen guys I'm on a thread with that I played with when I told them I was doing your podcast. There were a lot of, be careful what you talk about. If I start talking about something crazy, my phone's going to blow up.
Join us as Mike B. Ferroni talks about his bond with Kirk Ferentz, his journey into law enforcement, and his one chance to wrestle a match for Coach Dan Gable. Ferroni was a 4-year letter winner from 1989 to 1992. He earned second-team All-Big Ten awards as a senior in 1992. As an offensive guard, Ferroni helped pave the way for two Hawkeyes to rush for more than 1,000 yards in a season, Nick Bell in 1990 and Mike Saunders in 1991. Don't miss this look back with a true Hawkeye legend.
Welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. You can call me Beef. Coach Fry didn't even know my first name. He just knew I was Beef. I'm happy to be here. Congratulations to Coach Ferentz for his 200th win. That's an awesome accomplishment. I just love the guy. Not that Coach Ferentz is ever going to see this video because he has no electronics. Probably still has a flip phone.
You played for Coach Ferentz when he was an assistant coach, right?
Coach Ferentz was my offensive line coach for my first 2 years. He recruited me along with Coach Bernie Wyatt. Coach Wyatt was probably the most influential person in getting me to come out to Iowa. I have a unique relationship with Coach Ferentz because I got him as a coach for 2 years. We never lost contact. When he went to Maine to take the head coaching job, my parents went to see Maine play because they were playing close to New Jersey. That's the kind of relationship my family's had with Coach Ferentz for 30 plus years. My mom babysat Brion when Coach Ferentz was in Cleveland and I was playing arena football. My mom came out for a game and took Brion to the arena football game. Coach Ferentz is a special person. I can't say enough good things about him.
Was football something you were always interested in? I know you wrestled. Tell us about how football and wrestling were part of your childhood.
I never played football until 9th grade. I was always too big. For Pee Wee football teams, they had weight limits. I could never play. I was 8 when I started wrestling. I wrestled all the way through, played baseball. I grew up in Union Township, New Jersey. Union was one of the best athletic towns in the state of New Jersey. We were a blue ribbon school, and we also had the best athletics from little kids sports all the way through high school. It was a blue collar town, and there was a huge emphasis on sports. I started out wrestling, playing baseball, and I wasn't very good. My first season in wrestling, I didn't win a match. I was 0 forever, but I had 2 great coaches, Glenn Grant and Tom Collins, who were instrumental in my life and kept me wanting to wrestle, even though I wasn't very good at it when I was 8. Because of my weight, I was wrestling kids that were 10 or 11. It was tough. Neither of my parents played a sport. My father was a bricklayer, and my mother, a stay-at-home mom. My parents never really got involved in telling me that I wasn't good or anything like that. What my parents did, because they didn't know about sports, was they would just echo what the coaches were telling me. The things they heard the coaches say to me, they parroted that and supported my coaches. From when I was 8 through college, I've had the best coaches. I had 2 coaches in high school that are both New Jersey Hall of Fame coaches, and all the Hall of Fame coaches that I had when I went on to Iowa. So I've had a lot of different coaches who were successful, but are also great people. So that's a big part of me, because I look at things today, and I don't know how many kids after they went out for wrestling for the first year and got pinned 30 times, how many of those kids are going to come back the next year? Not a lot of kids. I was lucky to have coaches that had enough confidence and took the time to really try to foster my growth and kept me involved in the sport and were able to keep me positive when I wasn't successful. I played baseball too, and I was the last pick on my little league team. They had a tryout, and you would throw a ball. I hit the tee and I threw the ball over the gym. The first championship I won was in Little League. I played on a great team, and I had a great coach. He got stuck with me, but he took the time. I ended up becoming a good little league player. Funny story. I almost didn't go to Union, which was this powerhouse football team at the time, the best team in the state. When I was in 8th grade, I was in Catholic school. My mom and her parents wanted to send me to a Catholic high school. My father is a bricklayer. He didn't want to pay for a Catholic high school. My parents were on the fence on what to do. The Kids States Wrestling Tournament, which is for the whole state of New Jersey, 7th and 8th graders. I ended up meeting Fred Stengel through his son, James. Fred was the offensive line coach at Union High School. He met my parents. Coach Rutino, who was my coach in high school, also contacted my parents and basically told my parents that if your son has any potential to play college football, he'll get an opportunity to pursue that at Union High School. Plus, Union High School's free, which was great news for my dad. We decided on Union. I played in junior high school. My first line coach was my woodshop teacher, Russ Canavo. Besides teaching me how to make nice cabinetry, and he was a great coach and a mentor. I played tight end and defensive end. I was 6'2" as a freshman, maybe 210 pounds. That was the first time I ever had pads on. I was the biggest kid on the team, but I'd never hit anybody before. And I'm playing against kids who came up through the Pop Warner program who knew football. I knew how to wrestle. I was a wrestler in a football outfit. It was a good experience, and he was a good coach, taught me fundamentals. The high school football team had Tony Stewart, a great Iowa Hawkeye running back. He was the #1 running back in the country. Every day there would be 15 college coaches at our practices watching Tony play. Everybody was there, including Coach Wyatt. I actually started getting recruited because when they came and look at Tony, I'm sure back then they asked, there was no huddle to send tapes out on. They probably asked my coach, where you think are going to be good football players, and they would give them my name. And so I started getting letters as a sophomore in high school. From that point on, boxes and boxes of letters. From that point, my name was out there. People were talking, and it was letters and then offers. My high school team, my sophomore year, they were 11-0. They finished, I think, 3rd in the USA Today poll. And my high school coach, Lou Rutino, he's known like throughout New Jersey as one of the best high school coaches. His life was cut short at 54, stomach cancer, but his record was 190 something and 20. While I was in high school, I played on 3 undefeated teams, and every team won the state championship. My senior year, we started the season #1 and finished #1. We had Tony Stewart. Every team I played on had 4 or 5 Division I players. We had a ton of talent and a great coach. I had a great offensive line coach, Fred Stengel, who later went to Bergen Catholic. He turned that program around. They voted his 93 team the #1 team in the history of the state. He had guys like Brian Cushing on his team. Brian Cushing was a running back and played in the NFL. He's another Hall of Fame coach. I had 2 high school coaches that I was directly involved with, or Hall of Fame guys. So that was my high school experience, which it's hard to top that going into college. It was just like football in Union. It's like a movie. Back when I played, you were treated like a god around town. Everybody knew who you were. Everything was about football. And there was so much pride in our town with sports and being successful.
How old was Tony then?
He was a senior when I was a sophomore. He was the best high school football player I ever saw. I've seen tapes of Reggie Bush and those crazy high school tapes. He's probably too modest to ever make a tape himself, but if he did, there's nobody that could have touched him. He could do anything he wanted to do on a football field. My high school coach's mentality was when you throw the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 are bad. So we never threw the ball. It was probably 10-1 run to pass. The funny thing about Tony was everybody on the field knew he was getting the ball. They would be pointing to the place that he's running to and yelling. Tony would go that way, but it didn't matter because he would run you over. Or if he got to the sideline, you'd blink and he's gone. Everybody knew he was getting the ball, but no one could stop him. He was like a video game before they had video games. I got to watch him play. I lettered my sophomore year in high school. I was the first lineman at Union under Coach Rutino to earn a letter. If you wanted to play left tackle, which I ended up playing, I only started 1 year on offense. I started at defensive tackle my junior and senior year. Every year, we had guys that were going Division I that were playing ahead of me. It wasn't until my senior year that I was a two-way star. That's the kind of program that Union had. That was how competitive it was. Looking back on it, the competitiveness prepared me for college. With the wrestling, it was tough. Wrestling and playing football together, because the seasons run consecutively. My sophomore year, I was a starter. I started at heavyweight, which was a big transition. I had no hair under my armpits. I'm wrestling guys with beards and tattoos. I was young. I left that part out of the story. When I was a kid, I was rambunctious. My mother couldn't wait to get me out of the house. That's when I went to Catholic school. She started me a year early. I was the youngest guy in my grade forever. Even when I got to college, there's guys I was with in my class. Some of them were 3 years older than me. I was 17 when I went to Iowa. If I had an extra year of high school, I would have been a 2-time state champion in wrestling. Wrestling in high school was tough to start my freshman year. My freshman year, I did football. We played the last day of the season. The next day, I'm at wrestling practice, and I was never in condition. I belonged to the Edge Wrestling Club, a famous wrestling club in New Jersey. They produced hundreds of NCAA All-Americans, and anybody in New Jersey knows about Edge Wrestling. Ernie Monaco. My junior, senior year, during football season, I went 2 nights a week to wrestle. I had a wrestling partner, John Monaco. He ended up losing a national championship to a guy from Iowa. He was the first Division III wrestler to make it to the NCAA finals at 180 pounds. He was my wrestling partner, and I would go wrestle and get killed by him. And I'm 260, and he's throwing me around like a rag doll. I finished third in the state. I lost to the state champion my junior year by a point, and then wrestled back to third. My senior year, I pinned my way through. I pinned everybody my senior year and was a state champion wrestler. I was being recruited for football and wrestling during high school. For football, I could have went anywhere I wanted. I had offers from everybody. Really only looking at colleges for football that had a wrestling program or a decent wrestling program. That made them a little higher on my list, because I had the belief that I'm going to be able to do both in college. The only guy I could think of that's Mark Sindlinger from Iowa. He was a heavyweight Iowa and played center on the football team. I saw he could do it. I thought, hey, I'm going to be just like Mark Sindlinger. And you get into the Iowa wrestling room and get hit with that reality. And it's, oh man, this is crazy. Yeah, that was my high school experience. I won a state championship my senior year in football and wrestling. I just had great memories. Through all that, I'm following Tony Stewart, who's starting as a freshman at Iowa.
Which schools were you interested in that
Okay.
had a wrestling program, and how did you end up at Iowa?
Okay. I had offers from different colleges for football and wrestling. I narrowed the list to Michigan, Iowa, and Syracuse. Those were my 3 top schools. Miami was recruiting me as a nose guard. Miami at the time, like the 3 schools I just mentioned, they all had 10-win seasons the year before my senior year of high school. Syracuse, I think, finished number 2 in the country, or number 3. They had McPherson was their quarterback. They had an incredible team. So those 3 schools, Miami, and the 5th school was Ohio State. I was more interested in those 3 schools. So from Michigan, my recruiter was Cam Cameron, an NFL coach. When I was in high school, Les Miles was the offensive line coach. I'll tell you a quick Les Miles story. Les Miles comes to Union High School to meet me and watch film. My head coach was like, Michigan is coming in today. Les Miles shows up, and I'm like, hey, coach, how are you doing? He's like, all right, Mike. Hey, Mike, I want to watch some film with you. And I'm like, all right. He goes, why don't we put on last week's game? So I get the film, and back then we had projectors. It wasn't the videotape. Les Miles takes 5 minutes to put the reel on. I sit next to him. He puts on the first play. What Les Miles doesn't know is what happened before this play. This was our first play on offense. When we were walking out on the field, we played Linden, and Linden had a few Division I players on it. One of them was this outside linebacker. And when I'm walking with the team, we're 2 by 2 walking out onto the field. I'm first in line, walking next to my offensive line coach, leading the team. We get to the gate at the field, and this defensive end comes up to me, and I'm going to kick your fucking ass. Just like that. And I just looked at my coach, and my coach starts laughing. And I start laughing. We walk out to the field. So the first play he called, it was an ISO play where I'm blocking this guy by myself, right? Just one-on-one. Les Miles puts on the videotape, the first play of the game, and all he sees is me come off the ball, basically pick up this dude and put him on his back. And I block him off the screen. And as I'm going off the screen, I'm taking my forearm and I'm putting it across his neck as we go to the ground. Les Miles takes the clicker, puts it down, and goes, Mike, I don't have to watch any more film on you. We want you at Michigan. That was basically it. Michigan was my first visit. My host was Jumbo Elliott. He pawned me off to another guy. I think he had something going on that night. I ended up hanging out with other people. One of the recruits on the trip was a guy named Steve Everett. Steve Everett was a 4-year starter at Michigan and played in the NFL. Steve Everett at the time was probably 6'3", 230 pounds. I'm 6'2", 260. We're at this recruiting party. He's from Florida. I was talking to him and I'm like, what position are they looking at you for? He tells me offensive line. This dude is not going to be an offensive lineman in college. He's 230, maybe soaking wet. That was my Michigan trip. My mom came with me. She came on all the trips and I was really high on Michigan. I had a great trip. Bo Schembechler and Gary Moeller was the other coach that was in the office when I went for my exit. Bo said, you're a great high school football player. He thinks you got everything it takes. He's a coach. Tell Mike what we're thinking about him doing here. And so then Les Miles says, Mike, if you come to Michigan, you're going to play center. You're going to redshirt your first year and you'll be a 4-year starter. If you don't get hurt, you'll be a 4-year starter at center at Michigan. So I was like, okay, what are you thinking? I'm like, I love the school. I got a couple other visits. Right now, you guys are my number one pick, which was a recurring theme because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So everybody's my first pick when I'm talking to them. I go back after the Michigan visit and I tell my coach what happened, my high school coach. And the following week, I go to Iowa. Bob Cratch was my host there. My Iowa trip, because it was a blur, we went out and I ended up hooking up with Tony Stewart at the field house where they take all the recruits and the IRP, which I thought we got to eat every night if I went there. I'm like, oh, this is great. Steak and lobster every night. I'm loving it. I got to meet Dan Gable, who was my childhood idol with wrestling. And my mom really liked Iowa. She felt comfortable there if I was going to be away from home. We had a great relationship with Coach Wyatt and Coach Ferentz. That was my Iowa trip. And the following week, I visited Syracuse. I remember it was like 2 feet of snow. I was thinking it's going to be cold like this all the time. But what's crazy about my Syracuse trip was George DeLeon was the offensive line coach. Syracuse was recruiting me as a sophomore, so I got to have a relationship with him too. When I went to Syracuse, George DeLeon was like, hey, Mike, is there anything you want to do while you're up here or anything you're interested in seeing? I said, yeah, I want to shoot free throws with Ronnie Cycli. Because Ronnie Cycli at the time was one of the best players in college basketball. I got to go down in the Carrier Dome and shoot 10 free throws against Ronnie Cycli on my visit, which was pretty cool. And my mom went to Coach McPherson's house. Everything was great about the Syracuse trip. I had a tough decision to make. I had a visit scheduled with Ohio State, and Ohio State had just fired Earl Bruce. So they didn't even know who the offensive line coach was going to be. I crossed them off the list. Then I had a visit with Miami. And at that point, it was already wrestling season. I was getting out of shape because all you do on these visits is eat and drink. Every weekend I'm shot because of these visits. I told myself, I got to pick one of these 3 schools because one more week in Miami is really going to hurt me in wrestling. I ended up canceling that trip. I sat down with my high school coach and he's, what are you thinking?
Were you meeting with the wrestling coaches?
Oh, yeah. I got to meet Dan Gable. My mom got to hang out with Dan Gable for a few minutes. Wrestling's a big part of my family. So that was an awesome experience. I got to watch them practice. Syracuse had a good program. At the time, Michigan was in the Big Ten, it was just Iowa because they had dominated everybody. But any school I went to understood I was interested in wrestling. I'll tell you a funny Ferentz story. During wrestling season, I wrestled at Irvington, and they probably have a first-year wrestler there. But Coach Ferentz, Coach Wyatt, and a Coach DeLeon from Syracuse, all three of these guys, I don't know how many miles they drove to watch this wrestling match. I pinned the dude in 7 seconds. I didn't know they were at the match. So I come off and Coach Ferentz says, that was quick. And I'm like, Coach, I didn't know you were here. I would have let it go longer. But it was such an awkward moment because when I come off the match, I have Bernie Wyatt and Ferentz, and then I got George DeLeon from Syracuse. These coaches are here to recruit me. They showed up at the same time at an away match.
Like an awkward double date, right?
Yeah, it was awkward. What was really strange was back then, I think the coaches might have been allowed like one in-home visit. It was just awkward because I don't know if they were thinking, are one of us going to back to talk to his family or what? Neither of them came back, which was fine with me. But it was funny. And Coach Ferentz being the line coach, George DeLeon was another real respected offensive line coach. I'm sure those two had a conversation about blocking. It wasn't a total waste. I'm 17 years old. And I'm trying to pick where am I going to go spend the next 4 or 5 years at. It's this huge decision. There should be a lot of input from people that know something. But the fact that no one in my family ever went to college, I was the first person to go to college, let alone play sports in high school. I only really had my high school coaches as my input. I sit down with my high school coach. He could tell I wasn't sold on any. I liked all three schools. They all had great things to offer. It was a really tough decision. It was also a really tough. Bernie Wyatt, George DeLeon, and Cam Cameron, my recruiter from Michigan, I had a relationship with since my sophomore year. It almost comes down to who am I going to have the hardest time telling I'm not coming? I sit down with Coach Luartino and he's like, let's talk this out and see the best fit for you. He's telling me about Syracuse. Then he's telling me about Iowa. Tell me what you think about Michigan. So Michigan's the only place that they told me I would come in redshirt my first year and be a 4-year starter. My coach was like, no way. You're not going to be a 4-year starter at Michigan. They have 50 guys on the line that are upperclassmen. I don't believe that. So I'm like, that's what they said. But he goes, there's no way you're going to be a freshman starting on the offensive line at Michigan. So Michigan was out. Steve Everett, he goes there. He's a 4-year starter at center. That could have been me. Didn't work out that way. Then it was Syracuse and Iowa. When I visited Iowa, it was 70 degrees. When I visited Syracuse, it was like 40. I didn't realize Iowa gets just as cold in the winter. So I came down to those two schools and I'm like, all right, I got Tony Stewart there, who's a god. I had a good visit. They got Dan Gable and their football team. I like Coach Ferentz and Coach Wyatt. I don't think it was as hard a decision once I talked it out. It was Iowa. I was relieved once I made the choice. On National Signing Day, a representative would have you sign the letter of intent. I never talked to Michigan after my visit, and they had never contacted me again after my visit. And I left my visit saying they were number one. So National Signing Day comes along. In comes Bernie Wyatt with my letter of intent, which I signed in my coach's office. As Bernie Wyatt's walking out the door, Cam Cameron is coming in. And he's, what's going on? I'm like, I just signed with Iowa. He says, what do you mean you signed with Iowa? I'm like, I haven't talked to you guys in 2 or 3 weeks. I picked Iowa. He was a little pissed off. That started my journey to be a Hawkeye. And I have no regret. Once the journey started, it was all in. And that whole process, I was glad to put behind me because recruiting ridiculous. It was a lot of unnecessary stress trying to pick the schools. Coach Wyatt, who doesn't get a lot of credit, except for the people inside the program that really understand, is a huge part of why Iowa was successful when Coach Fry came in. Coach Wyatt's hands down the best recruiter there's ever been. There's never been another recruiter like Coach Wyatt. His honesty and the way he comes across and is able to build a relationship with you. He was such a good person. It was almost impossible to tell him I wasn't going. The funny thing about recruiting with Coach Wyatt was Tony Stewart told me when they talk to you, you tell them you want your own room. When you come to Iowa, you tell them that you got people visiting from New Jersey and they're going to put you in Slater Hall. You're going to get a roommate. They got rooms in Slater Hall that are single rooms with a bathroom. That's the room you want. So you tell Coach, when you come to Iowa, you want your own room. Coach Wyatt hooked me up. My first day in Slater Hall, I'm unpacking my stuff, and DR comes down and starts banging on my door. And I open the door. He's, hey, this is my room. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's your room. He's, no, there's got to be some mistake. I'm supposed to get the single room with the bathroom. Like, you need to go talk to somebody because this is my room. And that dude, he was pissed off at me for like the next 2 years at Slater. But I had my own room, and it was great because I didn't have to share a bathroom, which I don't have to tell you what the bathroom at Slater Hall was like on the first 3 floors. I graduated high school probably June 7th or 8th. The day my graduation was at 12 o'clock. I was on a flight to Iowa City at 4. I went to my graduation, walked, had my bags packed, and I was on a plane to Iowa to stay at the Mayflower with the other Rockheads from all different sports. Coach Wyatt picks me up at the airport, drives me to the Mayflower. We go up to the room. I open the door, and on the floor were the biggest sneakers I've ever seen in my entire life. They were like a size 19 sneaker. They look like boats. I'm like, basketball player? I walk into the room, and this guy he's laying in the bed. He starts to get out of bed, and he just keeps getting up. He keeps getting up. It's AC Earl. He's a center on the Iowa basketball team. He was number 55 too, which was funny. We both had the same number, but he was my roommate for this summer program. It was unique for an experience because right off the bat, I get to make friends with guys on the basketball team. AC Earl was my roommate for 2 months, so we got to be friends. It was pretty cool. I was there for a week and a half. Coach Wyatt calls me up. We had no cell phones at that time. So Coach Wyatt calls me. I'm in my room. He's like, hey, Beef, I'm going to have a couple guys pick you up and show you around. They're East Coast guys. It's Joe Mott and Peter Marciano pick you up and take you out. I have never experienced anything like that night. I'm 17 years old, and we're down at the field house, and Joe Mott was from Long Island and Peter was from Brockton, Massachusetts. I'm from Peter, and Joe picked me up at the Mayflower. And I'm thinking we're just going to go for a little tour of the campus or whatever. It ends up becoming a pub crawl. By the end of the night, 2 beers was my max. I had never drank before. I'm trying to be social, and they're taking me to the different bars. I don't think Coach Wyatt envisioned this tour. They had a different idea. Needless to say, I woke up with a hangover. It was a rough night, but I had a good time. They were really good guys. It sucked in the sense that I got to leave the day of my graduation to go to this college prep thing. But actually, it was good because it allowed an opportunity to ease into what college is, probably for the best, because I think all the people that were in that program ended up graduating. There's something to be said with bringing guys in that may be on the border of academic issues or not. But that was an interesting experience at night.
I think if you brought Peter Marciano with you, Coach Wyatt knew what he was doing.
Peter passed away.
Yeah.
Peter was a great guy and an awesome teammate. The loudest person in the room for such a little dude. When he talked, you had no choice but to listen. This is Rocky Marciano's nephew, which was really cool for my dad and my uncle. My father and uncle were big Rocky Marciano fans. They didn't even care when they came to the game to meet Coach Fry. They wanted to meet Peter Marciano. Peter Marciano came out with my family for dinner. He gave my uncle a couple tapes, had all Rocky Marciano's boxing matches on it. The next year, my parents tried to come out for games. My father was sitting with Peter Marciano. It was a huge deal for them. Fast forward, we in the dorms practicing. It was awesome. We're doing team things in the facility where I wasn't allowed to go. It was awesome to be part of a team. My high school coach always emphasized family. All the great coaches I've had, it's all been a genuine thing about family. That's one of the things Coach Fry on his visit talked about that also stuck out to me. This sense of family, things people never really equate with football. One, I would say, is love. We're all masculine men trying to kill people, but it's the love that you have for your teammates that really makes a difference in how you perform and how your team perform. If you don't all have that invested effort and time, and you're not together, and you don't really care about the people that you're playing with, it's really hard to have success as a team. Coach Fry was a big proponent of that, always talking about family, the Hawkeye family. We believed it. That was familiar to me because I had come from a program more successful than any other high school in the country. at the time. My coach was about family. When I heard Coach Fry talking about that, I'm like, that's my comfort zone. It's not about the best play. It's about, are these guys on 4th and 1 when they got nothing left in the tank and want to crawl into a hole? Are they going to find what it takes? Do they care about the guy next to them enough to push themselves through whatever pain they're feeling and get the job done? The whole family thing is what I think Iowa football is really about, which is why I got that picture in my background too. These are all my teammates from different classes. These guys are my brothers. My buddy Paul Kuyawa, the walk-on at Iowa, played fullback. He has a lake house, Wisconsin. For 1 week a year, he has all these guys that could make it. It's just us at his lake house, and we get to go back in time. You pay for it for the next month or two. The amount of time gets longer. Recovery time gets longer, I've noticed over the years. Big Ten championships are great, but if you don't walk away with relationships, guys, you can call your brother, then didn't have a great college experience. I run into a lot of guys that play college football. I'm a trooper in New Jersey. A lot of guys that played football, and nobody has any kind of things like I do from my time at Iowa. They don't have the same kind of experiences and stuff like that. It's a magical thing. Like, I can't even describe it. It is literally like you step back in time 30 years ago. It's like we never left the practice field or a game field. Everybody can be themselves. All these guys are super successful in whatever they wanted to do. But for 1 weekend a year, we can just be ourselves and not worry about being judged. You have people that love you. I get goosebumps thinking about it. The amount of caring from our shared experience under fire at Iowa, those are bonds you can't duplicate. I don't care how many Navy SEAL boot camps you go to for team building. You can't replicate what we have, especially with what we went through. This is what I walk away from. I can't put a price on being with guys that I played with that love me as much as I love them. If you don't walk away with that, you were robbed. Your experience was not what it should be. I know you guys feel that way. I run into different guys I played with from different eras after me. That's the kind of thing Coach Ferentz and Coach Fry foster because they're such good people and relationship people. It transcends to the players. You have that bond, and that bond is enforced because your coaches are your example of what it should be. Coach Fry, with his relationships with his coaches and his players, fired Bernie Wyatt like 25 times. He had a relationship with all his coaches, just like Coach Ferentz does, which is why not a lot of coaches leave Iowa to go someplace else, because once they get there, they realize this is the best place on earth if you want to coach football and change the lives of young people. You're going to stay there because it's the best opportunity. It's about the people.
I think that's part of the recruiting too, is trying to pick people that will fit into the program, be good team players, and someone you can trust and go to battle with.
It's hard to explain to people outside of that experience because it's a result of the environment and experiences. It's hard to explain. It's really hard to replicate that in anything else. If I left Iowa trying to find bonds, I'd be searching the earth for the rest of my life. Not a lot of opportunities unless you're in a battle, in a war or something, where you're going to be as close to people as you are when you're in college. Without outside influences interfering, you're in a bubble in Iowa, not the real world. I have friends still coaching college or in the NFL, and I'm like, the real world sucks. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not in the real world, dude. You're getting paid X number of dollars. You don't wake up every day and worry about how you're going to pay for this. You're still living in that fantasy land. If you notice, Bob Diaco, he looks as young as he did when he was at Iowa, right? Coaches will complain about stress, but when I look at the coaches, they don't age like normal people. Bobby D looks like he was a freshman when I watch him on TV. You know, something about working with young people that keeps you young. It's funny seeing guys age when I'm watching your other podcasts, like Scott Slutzker. I called Mike Devlin after Slutzker's thing, and I was like, do I look as old as Scott? He's probably just as old as me. I was the youngest kid in my grade. There were sophomores older than me because they stayed back or whatever.
I had one quick question. As far as your like split between the wrestling and football, were you want to focus on football and then wrestling was a side piece, or you were trying to feel out which one of those you wanted to focus on? Or how did that work?
I went over to Coach Gable during the football season, and he was like, as soon as you're done with football, come over. I talked to the football coaches. They're on board. I hadn't lost a match in a year and a half. I was a state champion in New Jersey, which is pretty decent wrestling back then. It's not Iowa standard, high school standard, or Pennsylvania, but it was up there. I hadn't met anybody that was going to beat me in high school. I go to Iowa, wrestle my first practice. Right after my freshman year, we played in the Peach Bowl. When we came home, I started wrestling. And my first practice, I lost 12 pounds. When I started, Andy Hammonds was the starter, and he was a senior. And then there was John Ostendorp, who ended up being the next starter. Mark Johnson, an assistant coach, national Greco-Roman champion. Royce Alger was in the wrestling room. And that's the other thing. Same with football. I guarantee you there's not as many characters on the football team or wrestling team right now as there was back when I played. It was because we had some characters now. Like we had Royce Alger, who you can make a movie about, that dude. I go out to a karaoke bar outside Iowa City. He gets up on stage and starts singing for the rest of the night. He basically took us out to be his audience. He was a total character. They had Rico Ciparelli. And then there were the assistant coaches like Barry Davis. He was awesome, awesome dude. Another Hall of Fame type coach, went to Wisconsin. We had great guys, great coaches. In my wrestling class, I had the Brands brothers, the Steiners, Tom Ryan. We had amazing wrestlers. You want to talk about a room of killers? Those dudes, I would just watch them in practice and I'd be like, these guys, they're fighting all the time. And Gable would walk around the wrestling room with a wiffle ball bat and you'd be wrestling and get whacked with the bat. If he didn't think the effort was high enough, he would walk around and whack people. He never whacked me that I can remember. Wrestling practice at Iowa was a whole other experience. Me being a part-time wrestler was worse because these guys wrestled all year round. Now I come in, I'm in football shape, not wrestling shape. I remember Randy Lewis, an Olympic and AA champ at Iowa, who was in the Hawkeye Wrestling Club where he might have been an assistant. Coach Gable and Fred Mims walk in before practice starts and blows a whistle, tells everybody, get up in the bleachers. So we all get up into the bleachers. Coach Gable says, I got a report that 75% of you have been missing class. Attendance is at 25%. And I don't know what you guys are thinking. If you're not going to class and you don't get a degree in wrestling, what are you going to do? The only thing you can do is be a wrestling coach, and you can't do that without a degree. So what are you doing? Why aren't we going to class? This is going to stop. I'm going to start coming to classes. And Fred Mims is standing there. Randy Lewis raises his hand. I got something to say, coach. So we just got our butts ripped by Dan Gable about not going to class, right? Randy Lewis walks up and it's serious as a heart attack in the room. He goes, yeah, coach, I've been going to school here for 9 years and I never missed a class because of wrestling. And it was like, there was a pause and everybody exploded laughing. 9 years. Gable shook his head and we went to practice. It was funny. Pretty cool. So I got through that wrestling season. They won a national championship. I was just a workout partner. I would come to practice every day and wrestle with the heavyweight Andy Hammond, or we would have a round robin. It was my first year, but it opened my eyes as to the level of what these guys are. I went in there and just got manhandled. This is a whole other level I've never seen before. Actually, Dan Gable talked to me a lot. That was the other really cool thing. There'd be times in practice where there'd be a break. I remember talking to Coach Gable about football, because he loved football. Like football was his favorite sport. He was just never big enough to really play football. He was asking me about Coach Fry and what does he talk about and things like that. So it was pretty cool. I think some guys in my class were a little miffed by it. The guys that were out there to wrestle, like the Brands or the Steiners, are probably like, why is Gable talking to this dude? Who is this guy? But for whatever reason, he liked talking to me. And when my mom would come out for a game or something, she would see him too. I redshirted freshman year. My second season's over. We ended the season earlier because we didn't go to a bowl game.
You redshirted your first year?
I lettered. I probably got spot play here and there, but I wasn't in a rotation. I was on kickoff return, extra point and field goal. So I got my letter. I want to finish with the wrestling thing. I go back out for wrestling. I was probably 270 from football. Lost weight again with wrestling. I got down to 245. It was good because I got rid of my baby fat. I could see abs for the first time. 240 with abs. I'm feeling pretty good. I can't wait to get to the wrestling season. Midway through the year, we were wrestling Iowa State, and Ostendorp, who was a starter, had tweaked his knee the week before the Iowa State match. And it wasn't like he had enough matches or whatever. It was a match he could sit. Coach Gable came up to me on a Tuesday and he goes, Ozzy twisted his knees. I'm thinking about sitting him this match. Would you want to wrestle? No thought process in my mind. You're coming from football. I haven't wrestled a real match in 2 years. Wrestling a guy ranked at Iowa State. None of that. It was, Coach, your name has been on my wrestling shoe since I was 7 years old. Of course I want to wrestle for you. So I was like, yeah, definitely. So that week I go back, I tell all my teammates on the football team, hey, I'm starting this week at Iowa State. It was at Iowa State. I'm like, are you guys going to come watch? So 30 football players take a caravan up to Iowa State. And it's my first college wrestling match, my first match in 2 years. And they were like, and they tell me the story. They're like, it was like this for us. Like, let's go, B. Let's go, B. Beef, get off your back. Get off your back. The dude I wrestled, he was good. He didn't pin me. I lost 12-2. It was close through the first 2 periods, but I was totally gassed. By the 3rd period, I felt like a fish out of water. There was no oxygen to breathe, but I see Dan Gable in my corner. I'm not going to quit. So I push myself through the match. I don't get pinned, which was an accomplishment in my book. And I get to say I actually wrestled a match for Dan Gable at Iowa. That's my wrestling experience. Coach Gable gave me a big championship ring for wrestling. This is a 1990 Big Ten championship ring. I got this ring in 1990 for wrestling, and I got this ring in 1990 for the Rose Bowl. So I got 2 big championship rings, and it was a great experience. And just being around Coach Gable, Coach Davis, Mark Johnson, and the rest of the guys in that room were incredible. It's a whole other level. And that was all during Iowa's period of dominance wrestling. But the philosophy and the mental toughness, that was probably the biggest benefit I got from all of that. Was it built confidence. Having endured a practice, it increased my mental toughness. Just knowing I made it through an Iowa wrestling practice, which you'd have to go through to understand what that's like. These guys went to drilling at 7 a.m. Then they went to classes. Then they went to wrestling practice. Then they went to dinner. Then they went to drilling again at night. They were doing 3 a days. They had some other kind of side job paid for their education because they were
on partial scholarships.
So no wrestler there was on a full scholarship. All the wrestlers were on a half or a quarter. They could split it up 4 ways. All the wrestlers had jobs in the off season. As crazy as all of those guys were, they would have did it for nothing. They would have paid the school to wrestle there and have that experience with those guys. The life of a wrestler at Iowa at that time there was no comparison to that of a football player. Just like there's no comparison to a football player at Iowa to a basketball player's life. I was friends with guys on the basketball team, and those guys had credit cards for their meals because they didn't have a training table. There was only 12 or 13 guys on scholarship. So if I needed a meal, I would go to my buddy AC Earl's room. I'd be like, start ordering, get some pizzas on your credit card because I'm hungry. We had the training table. But you could see the difference in the ring. Big Ten championship ring in wrestling is a pinky ring, and the Rose Bowl ring is gaudy. You could see where the money in college sports goes by looking at the rings. The wrestling thing was a lot of fun. Coach Gable gave me a sweatsuit when they won the Big Ten championship. He gave me a ring, said thank you for being here because they didn't have anyone heavy in the room. I was heavy when it started. By the end of the season, I was skinny.
After that 2nd year, were you planning to come back for a 3rd year, or were you already knew that you were?
After my 2nd year, I knew I was competing for a starting spot in football, and I wasn't going to beat John Ostendorp. I'd wrestled him enough during the season to know I wasn't beating him. I didn't see the point in taking a chance wrestling and getting hurt, jeopardizing football. It was the right decision because Ostendorp was an All-American. I'm not going to take a chance of getting hurt to be a scout team guy on the wrestling team. I would be missing spring ball. I had a chance to start my sophomore year, and I wanted to try to focus on all of that.
Was Ostendorf, was he already coming out to the football practice by then?
No, he didn't come
okay.
out to football until our senior year. He came out for football, I think, just because of the training table to get food. There was no NIL money back then. If you could get a meal and play football, he was maybe 230, a lighter guy. So I think football for him gave him an opportunity to put on some weight and maybe bulk up. He walked on my senior year, played defense. He was on a scout team. So I got to pay him back for the beatings he gave me in wrestling. Funny how things go full circle. My freshman year in football, we went to the Peach Bowl. I'm on a scout team with my classmates, going against Dave Haight, Joe Mott, Jeff Keppel, Jim Johnson. The linebackers were Jim Riley and Brad Quast, and Melvin Foster would be in there too, Merton Hanks, these guys. Iowa, it's not a new phenomenon having great defensive players at Iowa because they've had great defenses since I was there. Even when we lost, we always had a really good defense. Bill Brazier was a big part of that. Dan McCarney, Coach Wyatt. It's funny. So I'm a freshman on the scout team, and we're going against these guys. One time I go, they give us the play on a card. I go up to the line of scrimmage, playing guard. I'm going up to block Melvin Foster. This was the first play of practice, and it's full speed. I go up to hit Melvin. He hits me with a forearm to my face mask so hard that when I land on the ground, I was feeling my eye to see if it was still in the socket. I thought he knocked my eye out. That was my introduction to college football. When we started camp, Melvin, like all the seniors and juniors, would get up and talk to the team. Melvin Foster goes up to the whiteboard in the front of the team meeting room. He goes, I want to give you Melvin Foster's world. He starts drawing pictures. Up here, you have the clouds and the sun. That's the seniors up here. He's a little further down. You have the tops of the trees and birds. That's the juniors. Down to the trunk of the tree. That's the sophomores. Down to the grass, the leaves on the ground. That's the redshirt freshman. And he goes, you go under the ground to where the worms and the bugs and stuff was living under the ground. That's where you first year freshmen are. And this guy's knocking my eye out in practice. I was like, this is great. One of the benefits for me was Tony Stewart being there. I think I was accepted by the older guys more so than some of my other teammates because Tony would pull me along. My first year there, I remember I would have Chuck Hartley and a couple other guys like Marv Cook. I would go out with those guys. I thought it was the coolest thing. They made me feel like I belong there. I think about it now, like a senior taking, telling me, hey, like Chuck Hartley's like, hey, me and Marv are going to pick you up at 8:00. Just be outside the dorm. And then I get to hang out with these guys. I saw Chuck 2 years ago at a football game. I asked him, Chuck, we went out a few times, right? It's not like I have a concussion and make this up. We took you out. I'm just like, you were just different than the other guys. It was such a cool thing. His parents did a really good job raising kids. Chuck Hartley, his brother, Jimmy, and then there is no one on the planet wired like that dude anywhere else. I laugh so hard when I go to Wisconsin and he's there. He makes me laugh so hard that my ribs are literally sore for a week after because he is such a character. My freshman year was awesome. Got to go to the Peach Bowl. The Peach Bowl was a pretty cool experience. I felt bad for those seniors because in the 5 years at Iowa, that was the most talented team I played on. They were a top 10 team going into the season. For the amount of talent those guys had, they got robbed because they had 3 ties. So if you had to play for a win, who knows what their record would have been, but they tied the 3 best teams in the Big Ten that year. They were all great people. There was something that happened in each game that caused them to not finish where they should have. The Peach Bowl was a consolation because they should have been playing for something bigger. That's my first experience at college. And to have the leadership of Chuck Hartley and Marv Cook, Bob Cratch, Greg Divis, Bill Anderson was a junior. The group in the offensive line room really helped show us the path to be successful. Even though it didn't translate for that year in wins, it prepared my class of offensive linemen to put us in the right direction. I remember my freshman year going in the weight room and there's Mike Tate, who plays for the Jets, working out. We're doing drills with Mike holding bags. This is crazy. We'd have guys from the NFL that would come back and work out. You get to see those guys. So many people that didn't have to give you the time of day, like Mike Tate, first round draft pick in the NFL, coming back and he's going to spend time with a freshman like me and Mike Devlin, Scott Davis. Hey, can I work in with you guys? Are you kidding me? You're Mike Tate, man. We loved it. It was cool. You get to see that stuff. I was involved in an incident My freshman year was the first time I got in trouble in my life. I moved into my dorm room, and I had guys that their fathers must have been builders because they came with these elaborate bedroom sets. Yeah, you were one of those guys?
Yeah. But he's a farmer, but he built these
Pretty-
sleep bunk beds. Yeah.
So a single bed, and my feet were off the side. I couldn't fit on it. I get a big mattress, and it's on the floor. I have no bed stand or anything. My mattress was literally on the floor. I'm driving with Scott Davis to Hy-Vee, and behind the Hy-Vee, there's a huge 4-story pile of milk crates. I said, hey, Scott, pull over. The idea popped into my head. I'm going to get some milk crates, put them together, and put my mattress on top, and I got a bed platform. I have him pull up his truck. I load it with 20 milk crates, take off, go home. I put all the milk crates around my room. I even had enough extra to make a dresser. About a day later, Scott's room, his room was the next room down. He comes into my room. He goes, I got to run down to the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. What's up? He goes, I don't know. They called me. They told me to come down there. Turns out a guy at Hy-Vee saw Scott's plate, saw me putting milk crates in the back, and called the police. It had a sign on the side, which I noticed after I built my bed. It was like a value of $250. Times that times 20. And that's how much we stole from Hy-Vee. Scott goes to the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. They lock him up. They put him in an orange suit. And he calls my dorm room crying. He goes, dude, I got locked up for your milk crates. I'm like, are you kidding me, Scott? He goes, call my mom. Tell my mom she got to bail me out. So I call Scott's mom. I have to put all the milk crates back in Scott's truck and drive them back to Hy-Vee. The following day, Scott has a meeting with Coach Fry, and I'm in the weight room, Devlin and a couple other guys, and Scott walks in. You could tell he was bawling. Scott comes up like, what's up? He's like, oh, man, Coach Fry, he's so mad at me. I'm like, what did he do? He told me he wanted to see you. I'm like, what do you mean? I told him the milk crates were for you. I'm like, dude, are you serious? You ratted me out to Coach Fry? I got to go upstairs to Coach Fry's office. So I walk in, and Coach Fry's like, what the hell were you doing? And I'm just like, I don't know, Coach. I don't want to hear shit. You get in trouble one more time, I'm going to send your ass back to Jersey. I was like, all right, Coach, no problem. He said, that's it. I walk out and I see Coach Wyatt, and he rips me for a few more minutes. That was the last time I got in trouble. Famous milk crate story. I ended up sleeping on the floor on a mattress for the next 2 years in Slater Hall. The funny thing about that is the manager of the Hy-Vee ends up being like one of our best friends for our whole experience with Iowa. To this day, he passed away, but Jim Woods, the guy who managed the Hy-Vee, and his wife Susan have a scholarship in their name. They donate a scholarship for football, and they're huge Hawkeye fans. Later on in the season, I end up getting introduced to him. He's, oh, yeah, you're the guy who stole the milk crates. Woodsy was good friends with Coach Ferentz, and Woodsy would host me, Mike Devlin, and a bunch of the other guys who were out of state during the holidays if we couldn't go home. He ended up giving all of us a job at Hy-Vee. It was me, Mike Devlin, and Scott Davis. We would go to Hy-Vee, do our food shopping, and pick up our paycheck and go out. Needless to say, we ate really good while we worked at Hy-Vee. Jim Woods and his wife Susan were huge supporters of us. Woodsy and his wife came to my wedding. They're just awesome people. With the relationship you build, these are Iowa fans that were invested in the program and wanted to be a part of it any way that they could. I'm sure his profit margin went up once we graduated. We probably pissed off a lot of dumpster divers because the dumpsters were empty. Anything halfway edible, we would put in the trunk and bring home with us. Different times, right?
Were you still trying to gain weight at this point?
No, I could look at food and gain weight. I've always been like that. I was trying to gain good weight or gain muscle. There was none of this stuff today with the crazy diets and nutritionists. You'd have as much a chance of getting one of us involved with a nutritionist as you would getting us to do ballet or yoga. I would get 2 pizzas for dinner, 2 large pies. We could do a whole thing about the food places I put out of business when I was in Iowa City. The Vine had a deal where whatever table ate the most wings didn't have to pay for their wings. I never had a buffalo wing before. I went with Scott Davis, Mike Devlin, and Marty Baldwin. There's a table of 10 people. You see the sign, whatever table eats the most wings, your wings are free. We asked the waitresses, the most is like 450, but they're still eating. So it's 500 wings. between the four of us. They started bringing the wings out, and we each ate 125 wings. We got our wings for free. That was a home run, except for the next day. You need to not make plans for the next morning and maybe afternoon because you're going to be in a lot of pain. You're going to be sitting somewhere. We would go to Chinese buffet. We would hit all the different food places, whoever had a special. It revolved around food. The food things are the things that I remember vividly. I remember going to Lowry Steakhouse when we went to the Rose Bowl. The guy came by with this huge stainless steel thing with prime rib. The waiter asked how big of a piece, and you would give him this, like for how big a slice of prime rib that you want. I've never been in a place like this, and I'm watching people, this thing. The guy goes to me, I'm like this. And dude, it was the biggest piece of prime rib you've ever seen. I ate the whole thing. I could have ate another one. Another food story, L&B Steakhouse, just outside Iowa City. If you ate the 78-ounce steak, you didn't have to pay for it. I go with Devlin and Davis, and I get the 78-ounce steak. You saw the movie with John Candy. If he eats the grizzle, will you throw in a couple T-shirts for the kids? And I eat this whole steak. It was painful. The last pound of this thing, I think it was 7 or 8 pounds. I get through the last pound of the steak because I did not have enough money to pay. I only had $25. I had ordered water and steak. I ended up eating the whole steak. Devlin, he's watching his weight. But he's also the guy, like, when everyone's sleeping, he's down there in the refrigerator. I get into his car, and we drove 5 feet, and I'm like, dude, stop the car. I opened the door, and there went the steak. I couldn't keep it down, but I didn't have to pay for the meal.
How big is a 72-ounce steak? Like, we talking
It's like the size of,
everything?
if you take your laptop and lay it down, it's the size of your laptop and thick. It was literally that long, that wide, and probably that thick. It was a monster. I put that whole steak down, and it came up not as fast as it went down, but quick enough. You walk in there and I'm like, 78 ounces. Yeah, I could probably do that. If you didn't eat the thing, it was $100 or something. No way I was not eating that. So Coralville, there was the IRP, a Hardee's, and the cement company. Hardee's had a deal, 2 burgers for $2. Our freshman year, Scott Davis, Mike Devlin, and Lad Wessels. Wessels is going to take my van and go to Hardee's. And I'm like, what's at Hardee's? And he gets 2 for 2, 2 burgers for $2. So we load into a snowstorm, go down. Like, we didn't make a lot of great decisions. Fortunately, back then we survived them. The snow is piled up 6 feet high. We pull into Hardee's and we each get our burgers. So he unwraps his Hardee's hamburgers. He's got it laid out on the dashboard while Lad is driving. I have already eaten my 6 burgers. Next thing, Lad guns the van into a snowbank. Davis's burgers go all over the dashboard and on the ground. And it was like the two of them almost got into a fight. And he's, what are you thinking, Lad? I thought it would be fun. It was like, what? My burger's all over the place. So Lad picks up his burger, and on the burger, there's like pieces of rug, leaves. Scott, and he starts eating the thing. We had a lot of funny times with food.
I remember that 2 for $2 special. Yeah. I took advantage of that a few times.
I think they might have thrown in curly fries. After games, John Streif would have you write your name legibly, please, and then give you like $20. That was your per diem after a game. And it's like, what can I get for $20? How much food can I get? My redshirt freshman year, I don't think they were ranked, but there were a lot of good seniors on the team. I was on the kickoff return team. My first year, Hurley was a quarterback. My second year was Tom Paholski. I think we were maybe 5-6 or 5-7.
89 season,
Yeah.
started with Oregon. Ferentz was still there.
Ferentz, all right, so Ferentz was there. Sometimes I get confused because of the redshirt year. Plus, I probably had a few concussions when I was playing, but we didn't have concussions either when we played football. You saw stars. It was like, I see stars, and they're like, oh, you'll be all right. Just take off a play and go right back in. No, there's no concussion protocol. I get a kick out of that now. I was on special teams playing Iowa State. They had a kicker whose son ended up playing at Iowa Shudak. Coach Ferentz comes up to me that week and he goes, listen, this week, all I want you to do is go after the kicker. He's your guy. Just hit the kicker. First kickoff, I get to where I'm out of his peripheral vision, and that's when I start to go after him. I just ran a full sprint to take this dude's head off. And at the last second, he sees me. I'm airborne going to hit him. He moves, and I go right by. He was so pissed off. I missed him, but I was in his head. For the rest of the game, every kickoff return, I did the same thing. It's funny because you can't see it on film, but you'd see me chasing this little dude. He's running around the field, looking back at me, cursing, "Hey, you fat bastard, you can't catch me." I'm saying to myself, I'm totally in his head. We beat Iowa State. And then I saw his kid was at Iowa. If you ask Shudak that story, he'll tell you, I remember that lineman that tried to chase me, could never catch me. Coach Ferentz did. With me, it made it interesting. But it was a tough year. Tom Paholski was his first year as a starter, I think, when he was a junior or a sophomore. He might have got hurt, and then Matt Rogers ended up coming in. But for whatever reason, that team didn't work, and we ended up with a losing season. That's what led to a few coaches leaving. When you lose guys the caliber of Bill Snyder, who's a Hall of Fame coach, turn around K-State, Coach Mack, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame at Iowa State, Barry Alvarez was already at Notre Dame, but he lured these other guys up with him at Wisconsin. That's really hard to replace. We had that going on in the offseason, and also with it being like the first time Coach Fry had a losing season in a long time. If there was anything that kind of forged the relationships I have with the guys, it's what we endured in the offseason that year, not going to a bowl game. Ray Moran and Paul Longo were our strength coaches, and they unmercifully destroyed us. They came up with medieval methods of inflicting pain. It brought us together. None of us wanted to lose. All hated not going to a bowl game. We were all pissed off. And then on top of that, we had these two pit bulls every day just destroying us. And you couldn't do half the torturous things that they did to us. I credit those guys with the turnaround. Iowa had a record number of medical redshirts that year too. There was probably 5 or 6 guys that dropped from the team because of those workouts. I'm thinking they lost their heart. They didn't want to pay that price, and the price was high. Everybody that went through that together, we all came closer, and everybody that was there was all in. That's what led to that turnaround from a losing season in no bowl, a Big Ten championship, and a Rose Bowl in 1 year. We had good players, but even that Rose Bowl year, we had guys that were starting for the first time and not a ton of experience. Everybody believed in each other, and we overcame a lot. I was watching the 1991 Ohio State-Iowa game. They were saying Ohio State is really fired up because of comments that Coach Fry made last year. They showed a picture on the wall at the Ohio State locker room that Ohio State got lucky last year, and they did. If that ball doesn't bounce off Merton Hanks' chest into the hands of a guy running a cross route with nothing but grass in front of him, we win that game easily. It was a fluke touchdown. We should have never lost that game. Going through that season and coming back to the Rose Bowl, I remember on the road at Michigan State, on the road beating Michigan, Illinois. That year was ranked really high. They had the number 1 or 2 defense, and we had 520 yards of offense and scored 50-some points against the top 5. Maybe they were 4 or 3. They had 7 guys on their defense that went in the draft. After the game, the slice of Iowa fans that would be in the corner of the end zone, I remember going with my teammates, climbing up into the stands and celebrating with the fans at all of the away games. That was one of the coolest things we did on the way to the Rose Bowl.
Didn't you go to Miami that year?
We started with Miami. Miami was preseason number 1, and Washington finished tied for number 1 with Miami. We lost to Miami, but it was a competitive game. They beat us by a few touchdowns, but it was closer than the score said. Miami was a rough place to play. Their field was like a putting green, and their fans were throwing batteries at us, spitting at us and everything like that. And the locker room was like 150 degrees with humidity. You were just pissed off. We had good senior leadership, but we had a lot of guys, underclassmen, juniors, sophomores, people in my class that felt like leaders. For those next couple years, there was a lot of ownership on everybody's part to be invested in the program. Even in the games we lost, we knew we were a good team. We knew what we had to do. Nobody had to tell us. Kind of stunk going to Minnesota They announced before the game we're going to the Rose Bowl. It deflated things a little bit. And not to make excuses, I hate Minnesota. It was weird because now we got the ring and we still got a game to play in 5 minutes. It was surreal. I remember hearing they caught people having sex in the bathrooms. The fans were so happy. People wanted a baby the minute they heard Iowa was going to the Rose Bowl. They have a Rose Bowl baby. I cannot confirm or deny that story.
Those are real stories. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
police
Did you ever hear
records of
that
that. No, I've heard it. Yeah. There's people got arrested. at
Hurley,
trouble.
you got any
Oh,
kids?
yeah. Nope.
They were full baby.
I was not there.
We go back to Iowa City, getting ready for the bowl game, and the bubble deflated. Somebody forgot to turn on the heater for the bubble. We ended up going to Pasadena a week earlier. That's like the worst combination if you want to win a bowl game. Go to California for 2 weeks, eat, meet movie stars. Craig T. Nelson came to practice. He played Hayden Fox on coach. He came around with his ponytail, and I was just like, I'm surprised the guy has a ponytail because you never see it on the shelves. It was a really cool experience for my whole family to be out there, other than getting beat by Washington, which we avenged today. Go Hawks. The fans were awesome. Our fans traveled. It was just all the movie stars that were there. And my parents got to meet Bob Hope and Cesar Romero at some dinner they had for football. It was pretty cool. That's all they talked about. After that, in the off season, was my first hunting trip I took with my teammates. Doug Book had a farm in Keystone, Iowa. Doug Book and 8 of my teammates hopped into Lad Wessel's van and drove out to Doug Book's farm. We had at least 9 shotguns in the van. An Iowa State trooper pulls behind us. We got a whole keg of beer tapped in the back and 9 shotguns. He pulls us over, talks to Wessels for a second, and tells us to get out of the car. We all get out of the car, stand on the side of the car. It's cold. We're in T-shirts. The state trooper starts taking out these shotguns and leaning them up against the car. And I'm saying to myself, man, we're going to jail for the rest of our lives. And there's a keg of beer tapped in the back of the van. But anyway, he talked to Lad and then Doug for a couple of minutes. Traveling with the guns was legal, so there wasn't any problem. And he basically just let us go with the warning. That was the only time I've ever gone hunting. Yeah, this is probably not something I want to take up. But it was definitely an interesting experience. Anything moving had a good chance of getting 10 people trying to shoot a gun at it. You don't make the best decisions when you're in college. If you can survive, maybe next time I'll make a better decision with it. But that was a funny experience. Later on, in the summertime, we were playing in charity basketball games around the state. They would give you food and a couple bucks to go play a basketball game. Go back to Doug Book's town, and Doug Book's coach, he ended up being the D-line coach at Iowa for years. Yeah, Reese Morgan. He's, hey, Beef, I was going to order some pizza. What should I get? And I'm like, I'll get 2 pizzas. And he's like, 2 pizzas, is that going to be enough? Because you guys got 10 people. I don't know what they're going to eat, but you could get me 2 pizzas. I want to watch you eat 2 pizzas. He calls his wife, he's going to eat 2 pizzas. Coach, I could eat 3 pizzas. There's no way you could eat 3 pizzas. Get me 2 pizzas and we'll see if I can eat 3. So I ate the 2. And then there was extra pizza, and I ate another pizza. When I see Coach Morgan, that's the first thing he talks about. Do you remember the time you ate 3 pizzas at my house? I was far away from home. So I got chances to go home with guys on the team to spend time at their house. We always had a good time. My teammates' parents were awesome. They were broke from buying food. People could not believe how much food I could eat. I had to be all-American as far as how much food. I'd definitely be up there, maybe even all-world. That was a Rose Bowl year. We lost a few guys, but we had a lot of guys coming back for my junior year. Matt Rogers was a senior. We had 4 of us in my class starting on the offensive line, and Rob Baxley was a senior. The group that I had come in with, Scott Davis, Mike Devlin, Ted Velliser, and me, we were all starting. We had all played a ton the Rose Bowl year. Scott and Mike had started, and I played a lot every game. We had a lot of experience on the line. Mike Saunders converted from wide receiver to running back. Top to bottom, offense and defense, we had a lot of good players, a good, solid team. We blew out the first few people we played. We were undefeated, played Michigan at home, and I hate to bring up special teams, but we had a block punt. We lost to Michigan, and that was the only loss that we had. But that year, we played Illinois at home. They were ranked down with 3 minutes left, and we got the ball back. We had to drive 80 yards for a touchdown to win the game. We had a few third downs that we converted that were huge. And then we get down to the 10 or 12 yard line. It was 3rd and 8. The play comes in, an option play with Rodgers running to the right. I was on the right side. So every time the ball was coming my side, I was extra amped up, wanted to kill somebody. Rodgers is running this option play, and he ends up running, gets the first down. Me and Baxley had a combo from the end to the linebacker, and we both blocked our guys 8 or 9 yards down the field. Rodgers gets the first down. It's 1st or 2nd and goal. There wasn't much time left. I remember being in the huddle before Rodgers ran a quarterback sneak. Matt looks at us and says, "I fucking love you guys." I looked to my left and right, and everybody was crying. I could have called Las Vegas and put $1 million down on us scoring. I had no doubt when we got up to the line of scrimmage, we were going to kill whatever was in front of us. We ran quarterback sneak. He ran between me and Mike Devlin. And we're all laying in the end zone. Matt's on top of me and Mike, and we're all screaming, crying, celebrating in this pile of people. That year, we were pissed off about Ohio State to begin with. Last year, they got lucky, and we really should have beat that team. Going in there, we were amped up and we were disrespected. It's Ohio State, and they don't respect us. We all had a chip on our shoulders. The shooting happened either right before we got on the plane or right after we got off. I remember people, like I heard some whispering about something that happened in Iowa City, but we didn't have any idea. A couple of the seniors were saying there was a shooting in Iowa City and they're talking about canceling the game. Coach Fry was trying to explain what had happened. He's, "I totally understand if some of you guys don't want to play and we have no problem." I couldn't process that. I wanted to beat Ohio State. It was a unanimous decision to play the game. The biggest thing that stands out is Alan Cross's touchdown. When he was totally alone over there. A lot of people don't know, Bo Pelini was a grad assistant on our staff, and he had played at Ohio State. If we lined up in a certain formation at a certain place in the game, if the tight end's staying in the block, the end's going to rush and there's no one covering the tight end. I remember the ball was in the air for 10 minutes, and I could see Alan on the right side. I was watching him through the guy, and I'm just like, I'm watching him run. Please, God, catch the ball, because there was no one there. So Alan catches the ball and runs for a touchdown. Me and Devlin ran down doing the bushwhacker dance because we were so happy. The guy we were egging on, Greg Smith, blocks the extra point, and some other defensive end runs it back for 2 points. That's what you get when you celebrate too early. We had trips left in that formation, so their whole defense was on the left side. It was just we weren't losing to Ohio State. The sentiment of everybody from the year before and what we had to deal with we ended up winning that game. Unfortunately, that's the last time Iowa was won at the Horseshoe in 30-something years. It's a tough place to play. Other things I remember during the season, Northwestern had this hot dog stand just outside of the gate. The year before, we'd had gotten hot dogs before we got on the bus, because on the bus, they give you a roll with a piece of butter and meat, a bag of stale chips, and a soda, because we're all health conscious, right? Me and Ted Velliser, Devlin's in the huddle, and Devlin's always serious. We were winning the game. It was in the fourth quarter. I looked at Ted. I go, "Ted, 8 more minutes till hot dogs." And he's, "Oh, I can't wait to get some hot dogs after the game." Devlin's, "Are you guys kidding me? Like, we're 8 minutes left." He's yelling at us in the huddle. The play gets called. It's a guard trap. One of us was wrong, but both of us pulled and trapped each other behind Devlin on that play. And go back in the huddle, and Devlin's, "That's what you get when you talk about having food in the huddle." We all showered real quick to get out. We get out to the hot dog thing. The first person online is Coach Fry. And there's 7 coaches behind him, all at this hot dog stand. That was my hot dog story, beating them.
Just in reference, linemen are the last people out of the locker room usually, right?
We were typically.
But you guys took the longest time. Not sure what you guys all did, but yeah, you took the longest time.
We got the most body surface to wash, right? I don't know. I got to go back a little bit. Coach Ferentz left. I went to Maine my second year, and they brought in Coach O'Hara. Coach Ferentz is one of the most respected offensive line coaches. He's a head coach now, but he was known as a great offensive line coach. He was mentored by Joe Moore, one of the founders of offensive line coaching. Coach Ferentz was like a lot more with the technical things and footwork and with pass protection, pass blocking. We learned so many fundamentals of pass blocking with Coach Ferentz. Coach O'Hara came from a different emphasis, more towards fundamentals, but his style of coaching contrasted Coach Ferentz. His emphasis, he had been around a lot of schools that ran the ball. He brought in shoots, which we'd never worked with before. I had worked with them in high school, but we started doing drills in the shoots. They were both great teachers. I think Coach O'Hara more with run blocking, Coach Ferentz more with pass blocking. If you want to look at the success we had the Rose Bowl year, which was Coach O'Hara's first year, started with the things he brought and worked on with us as linemen. Coach had already taught us the fundamentals our first 2 years, and Coach O'Hara took that further. They were both consistent in a couple things. I never heard either of them curse. It was rare to see him get angry. He genuinely cared. He always would make time to talk. He really cared, just like Coach Ferentz. He really cared about you as a person and took the time to spend after practice, which I forgot. I didn't tell you what my punishment was for the milk crate caper. I have a tendency to suppress negative memories in my mind. Coach Ferentz, he goes, me and Scott after practice the next day, Coach Ferentz goes, Mike, Scott, come here. I'm like, he's, what's up, coach? He goes, as soon as practice is over, you guys take off your shoulder pads and your helmet and start running the stairs at the stadium. So I'm like, okay. He was pretty pissed off. We started running stadium stairs, and we had to run until the last player was on the field. So as the season would go on, and we ran for most of the season because this happened early, some of the seniors would stick around purposely after practice. So we had to keep running. We knew who they were. Don't worry, we'll get you back. We had just won a game, and everybody was feeling good. It was like the second or last game of the year. I finally got the courage to ask him, hey, coach, how long do we have to keep running these stadium stairs? So he says, until I forget why you're running. We ran like maybe another week or so, and then we didn't have to run anymore. I use that with my kids. That was a great line, man. Getting back to my junior year, we were playing Northwestern, and they had a linebacker who was an all Big Ten player, and also the punter. He was a tough dude. So anyway.
Sounds like a dream. Sounds lovely.
Ed Sutter's a linebacker. We were driving on them, and we're down by the goal line. It's 1st and goal on the 4 or 5 yard line. And we were up a touchdown. They call a play behind me. I go up to block Ed Sutter. Ed throws a forearm in my face mask and breaks my chin strap. I talked a lot of crap when I played. I would always try to get in somebody else's ear so much that Devlin would be in the huddle and ask me, what can I say to the nose guard? Give me something good to say. I'll tell him something. Ed Sutter was another one. I was talking a ton of crap. He pops me and breaks my chin strap. So I'm going back to the huddle and my chin strap's dangling down. So I don't come out of the game. I tuck it under my jersey. Coach Fry calls the same play again, which Coach Fry liked to do that. If you got something good, milk it till it's dry. I get down in my stance, my chin strap down, and Ed Sutter is looking right at me. I caught him this time and we scored a touchdown. I played with a broken chin strap, and the refs never caught it. I never wore a mouthpiece either. I chewed gum. So I never have a mouthpiece in. I never wore a mouthpiece in all years I ever played football. My mouthpiece story, the one time I don't have a mouthpiece in, we were playing Purdue. My high school teammate, Jimmy Young, was a defensive back. I was looking for him the whole game, but how many times does a guard get to block a defensive back? But there was one play where the whistle hadn't blown yet. I ran up and I gave him a whack. He starts talking crap, and I'm talking crap to him. And the referee says something to me. I'm like, it's all right, ref. I played with him in high school. Do you have a mouthpiece in? And I'm like, oh, shit, no. And he's like, get off the field. So he throws me off the field. I go to the sideline. I grab the first mouthpiece I see on someone's helmet, and it happens to be Fritz Ficure, who does nothing but chews his mouthpiece. So it's like trying to put a pancake in my mouth and run back out on the field. That I'm gagging for the rest of the series. With Fritz's mouthpiece, I'm not coming out of the game. But that's what you get when you're the referee. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of things wrong with that. Against Minnesota that year, it had snowed 8 inches before the game in Iowa City. That was a famous snow game. They shoveled the lines and put cones up every 10 yards so you could see where the 10-yard marks were. That's when Dane used the famous snow angel. We walked out in pregame, and we all had T-shirts on. Minnesota came out. They had hooded sweatshirts on. We looked over at them and we're like, dude, no way you're going to compete against us. We're wearing T-shirts and it was 30 degrees. That was a payback from the year before, and that was a great win. The painful thing about that game was the showers afterwards. When you're sliding on the snow and ice, you got these little nicks on your arm. I just remember the shower was the most painful thing. I had frostbite or what. I did have a plastic bags over my socks, like Coach Fry used to say. And it's cold. You get yourself a little plastic bag and you put it over your socks and then your feet warm and dry. I had a plastic bag in my socks, but nothing could prepare you for the shower after that game. Going out to the Holiday Bowl in San Diego was awesome. I think we stayed at the La Jolla Marriott. It was a super nice hotel. The food was awesome. We went swimming and had a lot of fun on that trip. We're playing BYU with Ty Detmer. And a couple of things I remember about the BYU game was we had 200 and something yards rushing in the first half. And we were beating them either 14-7 or 14-0. Maybe it was 14-3. We were beating them and we were just pounding them with the ball. They could not stop the run because whatever conference they're in, it's all passing. They don't ever see anybody running. Half the guys on their team were 30 years old, playing like old men. Sometime in the third quarter, Ty Detmer broke 10,000 yards. That was all we saw on the scoreboard. Ty Detmer, 10,000 yard passing. And that's when things changed on offense. We went to Air, Iowa. I remember we lost Leroy Smith, an All-American, great teammate and team leader who was done playing. That was a horrible thing. We lost him before halftime. We come out in the second half and they put that thing on the board. And the next thing we're going 3 and out throwing the ball. We had a couple of 3 and outs. Coach Fry comes over. What do you want to do? And Rob Baxley was a senior. We're just sitting there minding our business. And Rob Baxley goes, why don't we run the friggin' ball like we did in the first half? Coach Fry, okay, well, we'll get back to run the ball. But it was too late. Had we lost to Minnesota, we would have played in the Orange Bowl. The Orange Bowl people were at the game to offer us an invitation if we lost. But because the Big Ten had a contract with playing in the Holiday Bowl was the second place, we got stuck playing there against BYU. We got a tie. Maybe at the end, we were lucky to get the tie because we had to intercept the ball when they were driving. It should have never been that close. The last thing you want to do as a lineman on offense is just pass block the whole time. You want to go out and kill people. You have to have a different mental mindset on a pass play as opposed to a running play. On a running play, I'm trying to kill you, rip your head off, and drive you down the field. That was my problem when I started because it was hard to learn to pass block, to be passive and to sit back and to be patient. Because if you're aggressive when you're pass blocking, you can't do it. We focused on our senior year, doing everything we could to get ready for our last year of football. Crazy thing is how fast it goes. I remember as a freshman when Greg Divis said, make sure you enjoy as much as you can here. This thing goes by in a blink of an eye. You're going to be a senior like me. And I took that to heart. If there was one good thing I might have listened to, it was that. I did try to have as much fun as I could. It's amazing how fast it goes. Now you're a senior. I remember Coach Fry coming to us about the Kickoff Classic against NC State, asking if you guys, what do you think you want to do? Would you guys be interested? Because we had a tough preseason pre-Big Ten schedule with Colorado, Iowa State, and Miami. And now we're going to play in the Kickoff Classic against NC State. I remember everybody was pretty much, hey, we never get to go back home to Jersey or to East Coast. Yeah, it's an opportunity for us to play. We were psyched. I don't know if you remember my senior speech. I said, if you're on the kickoff team against NC State, run down the field and knock their pregame meal out their ass. I was fired up. The other cool thing with Coach Fry was the hit videos. Nobody else was doing that. He thinks he innovated in the game. There's Jerry Levias, the first African-American player to be offered a scholarship in the Southwest Conference. Then there's other little things that he did. We had a full video crew, like from my sophomore on. Like nobody had a video crew. Like those hit films, as you got older, you would get asked to pick a song for the hit film. Some guys had strange music taste. I picked the Metallica Seek and Destroy, which I have a Metallica story. So I've been listening to Metallica since 1984. when I got a bootleg tape from a friend who had seen them at this place called Farcher's Grove in New Jersey. It was their first year starting out. I've been listening to them since I was 12 years old. Fast forward now, in the off season between the Holiday Bowl and the season, Metallica comes to play at Carver Hawkeye Arena. Me, Mike Wells, Devlin, Davis, Baldwin, all 12 guys, and we're all big dudes. As soon as the concert started, everybody floods the front. It was like a mad dash to the front. Mike Wells was a big Metallica fan too. So Wells, being the meathead he is, going to lead the charge. We created a triangle and just started to wedge our way through this massive crowd. We moved 30 yards of people in this triangle till we got to the front. Wells was the first person, and I was right behind Wells. There's a guy who's packed against this big bar that runs around the stage. It's 5 feet high, and then it's on an angle, so there's fence under there. Wells starts peeling the dude's fingers off. The guy was hanging on for his life. One of us grabbed the guy, and Wells gets in the first row. We just start moving down until all 12 of us are on the bar for the Metallica concert. James Hetfield comes down, and as he's singing the lyrics, he goes, "Search in," and he puts the mic to the person's face, and they scream, "Seek and Destroy." We all got to do it with James Hetfield. That was my Metallica story. That was like the most awesome freaking thing. Going into my senior year, I thought we had a pretty good team. We didn't have a lot of depth in some of the skilled positions, which I think ended up having an impact once Jimmy Hartley got hurt against Indiana. That had the biggest impact on what success we were going to have. He competed with Matt Rogers for the starting job. Jimmy was a different style quarterback than Matt. Jimmy could run. He had some different talents that maybe Matt didn't have. But the one consistent thing with Jimmy and Matt was, if either of them had asked me to run through a brick wall, I would do it in a heartbeat. They were that kind of leader. It was tough to recover from that. That aside, we never lost to Northwestern, not in my 5 years. My senior year, we beat Indiana, but we lost Jimmy Hartley. The quarterback is the one position at any level that there's no equivalent replacement coming from the sideline. We had young guys, Paul Burmeister and Matt Ide, but neither had any experience. That made the season really tough, especially since we had so many seniors that had contributed to the success of the prior teams. By the time we got seniors, I think the impact of not having Coach Wyatt and the recruiting had started to show. And some of the other injuries, we lost Marvin Lampkin, our starting running back. That's Ryan Terry, one of the running backs. That didn't have a lot of experience. It's tough to replace a fifth-year senior with a freshman or sophomore that doesn't have any experience. It was a disappointing thing for my class to finish with a losing record because I thought overall we were a much better team. It's tough to overcome some of the things we did. The thing I'm proud of is none of us ever quit. Like, I remember Jim Hartley with a separated shoulder trying to play against Minnesota the last game. Like, find me a quarterback with a separated shoulder 5 weeks prior, even with pads on in practice, to tell you the type of person that he is. I remember him being out there. I'll run the ball. I don't care. He's in practice with a separated shoulder. He can't throw the ball 3 yards, but he just wants to be a part of it. And the injuries at that position especially is tough to overcome. We never lost to Iowa State. We never lost to Northwestern. We never lost to Wisconsin. We had a lot of good wins. When you don't have the success you're expecting, it leaves a hunger to do more. I know our class and the group of guys that you see behind me that were in my class, our thing was that we had such a good experience and close bond together that it didn't matter. We could have been 1-10 my senior year, and I would still be as close to these guys as I am today. We all wonder, what if Jimmy didn't get hurt? Where would we have finished? What if we didn't play in the Kickoff Classic? We played tough against Miami. Tom Arnold paid somebody to tackle their mascot, so we won the mascot battle that game too. It was the first night game in Iowa that they ever had. I have so many great memories that I don't get hung up on the record. It's all kind of gets folded into a blur of just a great experience overall. The only record I really remember is the 10-win season. That was a big deal to have 10 wins. Our senior year, to overcome adversity and just how everybody fought to try to win every game, even though we were heavy underdogs and had a lot of injuries. We still had great experiences. Spending time with those guys was great. After the season, Devlin Davis and Dana Hughes got drafted. Quite a few guys on the team that were getting free agent tryouts. We all graduated in May. I hired an agent. I'm 6'1 3/4", and I was 275 pounds. Scott Davis was 6'4", 275. They were telling him he may be too short to play guard. I'm like, what chance do I have? It was nice to get recognized and get all Big Ten selections. I just didn't have the size or the height that they were looking for in the NFL. I found a home in the Arena Football League for a year. I played for the now defunct Cleveland Thunderbolts. I played with NFL has-beens and NFL never was. I was an NFL never was, but we have 5 or 6 guys who had played in the NFL. They could not pass a drug test in the NFL, so they came to play arena football. They paid us like $800 a game, and they put us up in a dorm type deal. My roommate was Kent Wells and Bjorn Nitmo. Bjorn Nitmo was an NFL kicker. The 3 of us lived in on an apartment, and they were paying us $1,000 a week. If you won, it was all the beer and pizza you could eat. They literally took it from the concession stand. They wheeled in carts of beer and pizza. But it was fun. It wasn't nothing I was interested in really doing. I did that for a year, maybe 20 people on the roster. We got 5 new people every week. It was a 16-week season. Bjorn Nitmo, me, and Kent Wells were the only 3 people that started the first week and ended the last week. Everyone else on the team had been traded, hurt, or whatever. Or that's how crazy arena football was.
Wow.
It was actually good in a sense that once I got done, I was able to put that behind me. There was no lingering. If I don't get opportunity to try out for NFL, I am done playing football.
You were in Cleveland. You said something about Ferentz.
Was the coach. That was when my mom would come out to watch me play arena football, and she took Brion Ferentz to an arena football game. He was probably 9 or 10 years old. We've had that relationship with Coach Ferentz and my family. Every year, my mom sends Coach Ferentz a case of gum. Greg Morris, the equipment manager, Iowa, took the gum. I think it's K4 now. Whoever it is gets a case, and that's the gum he's chewing on the sideline. My mom is like, he's chewing my gum.
Relentless. That gum doesn't stand a
relentless.
chance.
No.
His mouth hurt after all those games.
In 2012, I get a call from Coach Ferentz. He's, hey, I got to ask you a question. I'm like, what's up, Coach? He's, would you be interested in being an honorary captain? I said, are you fucking kidding me? And he's laughing. I was thinking Purdue game. I fly in, drive to Iowa City, and the first person I see at the football complex is Coach Wyatt. Coach Wyatt comes up to me, gave him a hug. We walk in, and there's Rita Foley. And I'm like, holy cow, like nothing has changed except for the building. In 2012, I noticed all the things they had told my class we were going to get. This class clearly got it. They even have soda machines in the locker rooms. I'm like, this is crazy. The first time I saw the new facilities they had, I had a chance to talk to the team. It was a huge thrill. Coach Ferentz and his wife, Mary, started that whole kid captain program. The concept, the wave tradition they started with was totally unexpected. And it was one of the great honors of my life, even though we lost by a field goal to Purdue. He is the exact same person he was when he came and recruited me at high school in a gym in Irvington after a 7-second match. He's always been the same. He's always answered the phone. And the few times that I call him, being able to go back to Iowa City and seeing Rita Foley and K4, Greg Morris. So many of the support people were there when I was there. John Streif up until a few years ago. He retired now. That's the continuity of that program, that's had 2 head coaches in 45 years and the same secretary. Yeah. I don't know if there's a promotion they can give Rita Foley, but for what she's done for the program, she put up with Coach Fry and Coach Ferentz. She deserves some kind of trophy or award. The people in that program that both head coaches have chosen to work, they've all been high character, high class people. That's what makes the program so great. Coach Fry had a knack for identifying talent and character. He did it with everything that he did. The players he recruited, he did with the coaches that he hired. You could argue Coach Fry's coaching tree is in the top 2 or 3 of any college coach because he's produced many coaches. Coach Ferentz's tree may not be as big because he's had coaches come and stay for 40 years. The loyalty thing. That's a word you don't hear a lot in football today. Everything is about this minute and what's best for me. Coach Ferentz and Coach Fry were loyal to a fault. Sometimes you're loyal to the people that you're working with. The flip side of that is a Phil Parker, who's loyal to Coach Ferentz, and Coach Ferentz is loyal to him. And no one's going to argue that he's not the best defensive coordinator in the country, because you show me another team that has stats like Iowa's with the recruiting classes that Iowa has. He's always in the top 2 or 3 total defense in the country, but he's doing it with maybe a 20th or 30th ranked recruiting class. I would find these anonymous trolls that want to beat down a player. I know their effort is where it has to be if they're at Iowa. You're not going to make the field if you're not an effort person. I know you're a good person. It's not like the guy's trying to miss a block or miss a tackle. And these people in the public, they're the piss ants and shoe clerks, as Coach Fry would call them, who never fired a shot. The other thing I'm happy I didn't deal with was cell phones. If they had cell phones back when I was in college, it would be a different deal. I don't know how these guys do it. Everyone has a camera on their phone. Everybody's recording everything you do. One bad decision you make, it's going to impact you for the rest of your life because some idiot had their phone out and saw you were a football player and was recording you.
Look at these football players rushing up and pushing everyone out of the Metallica concert.
Oh, forget
in
it.
the
Yeah.
front.
It really aggravates me when I read stuff online about people talking about Coach Ferentz's salary. I can guarantee he probably doesn't have a pair of underwear less than 15 years old. In 2012, he was on a treadmill wearing a shirt from 1984. It's not about the money for Coach Ferentz. People don't understand that. He's taking pay cuts. He's donated millions of dollars of his own salary to the hospital. I'd like to know the top 10 college coaches that donate whatever the highest percentage of their salaries to charity are. I guarantee that's a top 10 list Coach Ferentz would be on, besides
sure.
the 200 wins. It's just aggravating because people outside the program have no clue what it takes to win at Iowa, the sacrifice the coaches and players make. What are people aggravated about? You have a team like Iowa the last 20 years where it's an 8-win or better team a year. From 1956 to 1978 or 9, Iowa had 20 losing seasons in a row and had, I don't know how many coaches they had during that period. How did that work for Nebraska, getting rid of Bo Pelini, who won 9 games a year? You could go up and down the list of these teams. We're Iowa. We're a team that we're going to develop a player over 3 or 4 years who's going to be at the end of their career a dominant performer, and they're probably going to have a shot at an NFL camp. We're not a team that gets guys from the transfer portal or that gets these 5 or 6-star, 10-star players that come in and they're going to start their first year in 2 years. We're like a developmental program that we're going to win consistently, which is what Coach Ferentz brought. Every 4 years, we may have a team that's a Big Ten championship caliber, but that's what we're built for. If you want to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia, we need donors to put another $150 million into the NIL program. Then you can go out and buy players like those teams, because that's what they're doing. Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan, they're like 3 times what we have. They're going out buying a player. But the whole NIL thing makes me sick, because I'm scraping quarters to buy pizza or Hardee's sandwich and eating it off the floor. But it is what it is. I think it's college football's changed forever. But the biggest difference now is all the teams that weren't paying players before now, they're allowed to pay players. Anybody that tells me Alabama, Georgia, maybe I'm not going to say Alabama because I heard a reliable story about Nick Saban about that. There's SEC schools, I'm sure, paid players in the past. Cam Newton had a story, $150,000 to go to Auburn. But it's aggravating because look at how much money this NIL thing has put in. There's a correlation with the teams that have the most money and where they've ranked. They're paying for the best players. But what does that experience do for the overall team? To bring a guy in for a 1-year deal, pay him a ton of money, is he bonding with his teammates? Are they going to have the same kind of relationship? That's what I feel bad about these guys now. There was no transfer portal when we played. You guys are perfect. Brian, you played behind Nick for a while.
Yep.
Until I beat the guy in front of me. I didn't have a choice. Let me go pick another school next week. It was like, I need to beat out this guy to play. It's pretty simple. But that whole thing is gone now. because of this transfer portal. Guys go to a place and they think they want to play today. They don't want to wait, so they go to another school. But it's like their experience is going to be a lot different than the experience of the guy that sticks and works. I think there's something with the NIL that affects the number of walk-ons you can have on a team.
I think they're going to increase the total roster, but you can only have so many scholarship. And I don't know, they're doing something with the roster limits, and that will probably reduce walk-ons. Yeah, but I think that's kicks in next year.
Which is a horrible thing for Iowa, because if I'm looking at that picture, I can see at least two guys, Paul Kuyawa and Chris Green.
Cliff King was a walk-on.
Cliff King. Yeah, these guys are walk-ons that earned a scholarship. That's taken me years to understand. I wish I had a better understanding of that when I was at Iowa, because it was back when I was there too. I think that they treat walk-ons today a lot different than the way a walk-on was treated when I was playing. The walk-ons, I know when I played, they didn't get the training table. You're treated like a secondhand citizen. I remember when Coach Fry gave Paul a scholarship at practice and Paul was crying. To me, I'm like, oh, it's cool he got a scholarship. But I didn't realize he was paying everything, taking all this abuse, running up debt and all this other stuff. I have so much respect for those guys that went through that, for any walk-on willing to take that chance with nothing promised, compete, and maybe never even see the field. And just compete for 5 years without ever suiting up for a game. That's huge. You want to talk about character? We had so many of those guys, like throughout the time that I played. There was like so many great players at Iowa that walked on and ended up earning a scholarship. The NIL thing is bad. It's unregulated. I don't know how you put the brakes on that. What's the difference between college now and the NFL, really?
If they can make it fair again, but equal, people are going to drop out and stop watching. And that's what's driving this money, is the TV contracts, but that's based on people watching, and they want to watch competitive football. If big schools start pulling away and becoming super schools and it's not competitive, people are going to stop watching. They have to figure out a way to make this equal across the playing field, or people will stop watching. You'll lose interest, because that's what people love about college football. I like college football, not NFL, because at least in the past, it was there because they love playing football and they're playing for their school. So I hope they figure out something soon.
We'll see what happens. They open the door and it's a nightmare. Not that the NCAA, the way they regulated things, their stinginess kind of led to all of this, but it is what it is. And good luck with all that. It's more difficult for coaches to deal with. The whole money aspect of the NIL program adds issues to players on teams that have a good year. Unbeknownst to the coach, are shopping their stuff around to see where they can get a better NIL contract on a transfer. It's hard. We got X, Y, and Z at this position, and we lost X, plus Y, and Z's looking for a better job or more money. After football, I came back to New Jersey. I had taken an exam for New Jersey State Police. I had a full-time substitute teacher job, which paid the teacher's salary in union. I stayed there until I hired by the state police. I waited 3 years and then I got it. I've been doing that for the last 27 years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
3 years? Gap? Wow. Just to get into school.
That was a long time. There was a hiring freeze, so I had to wait. They were the only department I wanted to work for, because you could work anywhere in the state. A friend of mine, trooper, talked me into doing the state police thing. It's been a great job. It's 27 years and I got another year or so, and then I'm going to have to get a real job. So I'll be looking again. I have to start trying to figure out what I want to do. Might want to do something in coaching and teaching at a high school level. I volunteer coached at every level for football since I got done playing. The last 10 years, I coached high school offensive line for a couple different high schools. I got to coach my son, Anthony, for the last 4 years of his high school. I was the offensive line coach at his high school. That was an awesome experience to be on the field every day with my son, even though I didn't coach his position. I always had a rule with my kids playing football that I would never be their position coach. I coached high school for 4 years as a volunteer at North Warren High School, and they had a good head coach. I brought one of the coaches to Iowa's coaching clinic. We sat down, we're sitting at the table. I see Coach Ferentz. Coach Ferentz comes over, sits down. He's, hey, how's it going? I heard you were going to be here. My friend Gene Flory He reaches over. He's Coach Kirk Ferentz. My friend's in shock. Just imagine this guy on TV just came over, sat down, talking. That's how Coach Ferentz is. Every person I've introduced to Coach Ferentz has had the same impression of him. I got another story just popped into my head. What year did Adrian Claiborne block that punt at Penn State? I was playing at Penn State, and I called Rita Foley, and I asked her if I could get 2 tickets to come to the game. Rita, let me get back to you. She tells me, yeah, we have 2 tickets. One of the troopers that I'm working with had never seen a college football game before. He was a sports fan, but he'd never been to a college game. So I said, hey, I got another ticket. Do you want to drive with me to Penn State, Iowa game? So he goes, I'd love to come. Now, Matt Kroll, he was with us. I didn't play with Matt Kroll, but Mike Devlin, my best friend, was a coach on the Jets. I said to Devlin, I'm going to the game, see if Matt Kroll wants to come. I'll drive him. Kroll got his own tickets because he played during the Ferentz era, so he's got more pull. We go out to the game. We get out of the car. I didn't talk to Matt Kroll before the game to set this up, but Matt Kroll and I just happened to wear our Iowa Letterman's jacket. I'm going to be buried in that thing, by the way. It's like expressly written in my thing because of what I feel like I had to do to earn that thing. My Letterman's jacket, I'll be buried in it. Trust me. We are both wearing our Letterman's jacket. So we have to find our way to will call. Me being the trooper, I'm awesome with directions. I parked on the other side of the stadium. So we had to walk all the way around. As soon as we get out of the car, there's an ABC or NBC film crew. They come up to us. They're like, hey, would you mind if we filmed you going up to the stadium? I'm like, why do you want to film us? Let's just say Iowa fans haven't been getting the warmest response from Penn State fans when they walk up through bushes. This films crew starts following me, Kroll, and my friend. We got booed. As soon as we came through and they saw our stuff, every entrance to get into the stadium, there was like 30 wide and probably 20 yards long of people. We had to walk through. Every one of those fans is pointing at us and booing. It was like something you'd see in a movie. The trooper I'm with is just laughing like he goes, this is crazy. And we get to the other side, get our tickets, get in. Long story short, Iowa wins the game. Matt Kroll actually got sideline passes. He was meeting another guy that he played with. They were on the field for the first half. And he goes, you can have the passes for the second half and we'll sit in the seats. So for the second half, me and my friend who's never been to a freaking college football game are on the sideline for the whole second half of the game. It was loud and it was great because of the way Iowa played. It was an unbelievable experience. I'm trying to tell him, listen, you've never been to a game, but you will never be to another game with this kind of an experience in your life. I promise you that. He was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I can't believe it. This has been awesome. So now the game's over. The team goes into the locker room. At Penn State, they have a brick garage under the stadium. That's the visiting team's locker room, right? I'm walking through the tunnel and Greg Morris is in front of the locker room with K4 and somebody else. I was like, hey, what's up, Greg? I'm just talking to him for a couple minutes. Coach Ferentz sees me. I'm standing there with my Letterman's jacket on. Coach Ferentz goes, hey, he comes up to me, shakes my hand, goes, come on. And I'm like, what? He goes, come with me. And I'm like, Coach, I got this other guy with me. I'm pointing to my friend. He goes, Kirk Ferentz. And my friend's Tommy McElroy. He goes, come on. In the locker room. We go in the locker room. 2 seconds later, they're singing the Fight for Iowa song with the team. I was almost pissed off because I waited, 20 years to see this again. This guy, first college game, gets to see that. This is crazy. But that's the kind of person Coach Ferentz is. So it was like, I almost have to mute his text because I'm on a thread with the people I played with for every Iowa game. He'll be texting me like, how the Hawks going to do? What do you think the Hawks are? Like, he's as big Iowa fan as anybody. When I played, we used to do the hokey pokey for a big win. Coach Fry did the crazy hokey pokey thing. That was awesome. The fans booing us before. It was great because when we left, they were all gone. No one wanted to talk about the Iowa football team after we left. I've been a trooper for 27 years, sergeant first class. I have an administrative job. I had a lot of good jobs in the state police, met presidents from other countries, did security for different dignitaries. I got to meet James Gandolfini and a few other actors because some of the jobs that we would work were like working on the set for different driving scenes. I had a lot of good experiences. I tell the guys that are graduating with the Legacy Hawk thing, it's a great career for anybody, especially if you enjoy a team concept. It's very similar to being an offensive lineman. It's a thankless job. No one knows your name unless you make a mistake. There's been quite a few Iowa players that I know. Dave Turner, he was a year older than me. He's a police officer. Herb Webster, they had to design a police car for him because he's 7 feet tall. He was an Iowa state trooper. I've been lucky to get this job. I've had a great career and I enjoyed it. I have a year left. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anything where you have an opportunity to build the relationships that you do. My friends from college, it's not even close. If you're chasing that, I don't know if there is somebody that you interview that says, yeah, I got this job. I have the same feeling about the guys I work with as I play with. If you find that guy in that job, can you email me and let me know? I don't know where that exists outside of a football field or maybe a basketball court, like a coaching job or something.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. I was smart enough to know that you're not going to find that anywhere. Mike Devlin, we met before we went to Iowa at the All-State dinner. We were both committed to go to Iowa. So that's where we started our relationship. And I talked to him every day, like literally every day. So when I got done playing and I went home, I would classify my friends as every person I played with and knew before in one class. And then there's the people you meet after. It's just a different bond or trust. I'm most thankful for my experience at Iowa, that I got to meet the friends I have for the rest of my life. These are real people. The stuff we talk to each other about, you can't with your wife or your priest. There's a level of trust. No matter what else is going on in the world, I know the guys that show up at that cabin, those are my brothers. This is something I'm really thankful for. I didn't understand it when I was a player. Coach Fry would say, you guys are going to be friends for life. You're 17, 18, 19 years old. You're like, what does this guy know what I'm going to be? 100% correct. If you put everything you have into something and you're surrounded by people who do the same, you have a chance to have that kind of relationship. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't be attracted or bonded to people that made half an effort. You're not going to find half-ass effort at Iowa. Like those guys I bled with, just the summer workouts with Ray Moran alone. You survived that thing, you survived the POW camp or something. When you got an experience, you're not going to replicate anywhere. The relationships I've been blessed with my teammates and coaches throughout my life, that's the real payoff. To me, that's really what it's about. It's about the relationships that you build with other people. It's gotten me through so many things in my life. Whenever I would have something like my father pass away or other trauma or adversity to face, I always have in the back of my mind things I had in college with my friends. It puts things into perspective. I'll get through this because I know these guys support. It's real support, and it's not like some fly-by-night thing. It's like my buddy Cooch has on his cabin. He's got a sign and it says, it takes a long time to grow old friends. And when you think about it, that's exact. Every time I walk into the cabin and see the sign, I know I'm home with my family. These are my brothers. So I made a sign for Paul for his cabin by hand. It's all recycled. I'm thinking I might go into some kind of business like that if there's any kind of demand for a handmade sign you could hang. I thought the sign came out pretty cool. I've made that for a couple of my teammates just because I like working with wood. I'm at the point now with a year left to go in the state police, and I'm going to start looking to try to figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's like I'm back in limbo, like out of college. The difference now is these guys have so many great outlets, platforms to connect and possibly get a job. We never had anything like that. When you were done, you're out. You know what I'm saying? You got to figure out what you're going to do on your own.
Well, you're still young. It feels like you're ending things 55. You're halfway there. So you have a whole life left to consider. What do I want to do for the next 30, maybe 40 years?
Yeah. If you really knew me back in college, you'd be like, he might make it past the senior year. I was never afraid to try anything. We did crazy things. I remember going to the reservoir with cliffs that you could jump off of. No idea where the rocks start at the bottom, but I was the first person off the cliff jumping in. Neither of my parents went to college. My father was a bricklayer and my mom was a homemaker. Unlike probably 90% of the guys, college for me was the 5-year reprieve from the real world. My real world was going to work with my father, laying brick or learning some other trade. If I didn't have Coach Wyatt and Coach Ferentz, who were really on me about academics and stuff like that, I'd never got my degree. I'd probably end up like a lot of guys. They're there for a year or two and then flunk out. But these guys were like on me with Sue Walker. I still have nightmares of chasing me down for study hall. So I get through college. I'm in my junior year and I've never declared a major. I get a letter or something. They're like, you have to go down to the registrar's office to declare a major by junior year, whoever my guidance counselor was, I never met. So I walk into the office and it's this maybe a 40-year-old woman, 50-year-old woman. And she's, okay, Mr. Ferroni, so you're here to declare a major. I'm like, yeah. And she said, what major do you want to pursue? So I said, what degree am I closest to getting? I've been working here for 30 years and no one's ever asked me that question, but let's see. So she goes on her computer and she's, okay, all right, so here it is. You can get a Bachelor of Science in something, but you have to take calculus 1 and 2. I'm a junior. I haven't had math since high school, so I'm not a math person. I don't want anything to do with calculus. I'm like, what's my other choice? She's, oh, you could get a Bachelor of Arts in sociology, but you have to have a 4th level of a foreign language. I hadn't had foreign language since high school, but I did have French for 2 years in high school. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do sociology major. And the only thing I had to take maybe 4 classes to get my degree at that point, because I had bounced around. I took a lot of leisure studies classes. Can you believe that's a major? That was Mike Devlin's and Scott Davis's major. I took a lot of classes with them, but I didn't go for the rest of the classes. I would ask people, what are you taking? How's that class? All right, I'll take it with you. So anyway, my junior year, I declared that major. I took French 3. And basically cried to the teacher, if I don't get a D+ or whatever, I'm going to be digging trenches in New Jersey with my father. She let me do some extra credit work to get a D. I still needed French 4. I took French 4 my first semester. I bombed the class and withdrew before the final. But teachers in college, and this is unfiltered, right? They're lazy. So they don't change their syllabus. All right. So the next semester, I took the same teacher, the same class, but I already had all the stuff. So I got a tutor. We worked on all the stuff and ended up getting a C+ in French 4 and got my sociology degree. I wouldn't recommend that route for anybody, but that was my route, the degree. I would have never got the degree had it not been for Coach Wyatt and Coach Ferentz being on me so much about school. I was there to play football. I thought, my father worked his whole life. 50 years of digging ditches is going to be rough. Let me have something good to go back from. Let me have some good experiences. I got my degree. Coincidentally, you needed a 4-year degree to get into the New Jersey State Police. So it worked out. After I flunked French my senior year, I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm not going to get my degree in May. I'm going to take a correspondence course to get my degree. You could take the French thing correspondently to get the requirement to get the degree. And my mother's, if you don't get your degree, do not come home. So I didn't have a choice in the matter. I ended up having to figure out a way and I passed it.
When I would see people working in winter, like doing construction on the bridges, that was motivating for me. I was like, I got to make sure I stay up on my studies because I don't want to be stuck at 7 a.m., 10 below outside working on construction as I'm driving past these people, busting their ass. I was like, I don't want to be stuck. Like, that's my only option.
I used to work side jobs with my father and I was a laborer. I mixed the concrete. I would carry all the block. All I did carried physical work. And I did that enough with him to realize I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life. So I had a lot of motivation, but my mom was the one, she really means it. It wasn't a negotiable. When she said, don't come home without the degree, of course, the locks would have been changed on the house if I tried to show up without that. That was pretty funny. There's so many parallels or things that I could directly connect to any success I had in my life with football and what the relationships with football have brought me. That's what I'm most thankful for. If anybody walks away from this, they're going to know I appreciate every one of my teammates and their sacrifices. I appreciate the relationships I have. I feel bad for people in the real world that don't have those kinds of bonds, maybe except for their spouse. It's a shame. If you could take a little bit of that and bottle it, that feeling, that euphoria, you could sell that for $1 billion. Anytime I think about that, I get goosebumps. It reinforces the kind of person Coach Ferentz is. He's that coach. He'd probably coach for $100 a week. He's not about money, never has been. Like I said, no offense to you, coach, but time to get maybe some new t-shirts or running clothes. That's the hard part after playing. You have relationships with these people and you love these people, because I legitimately love him, his family. You hear people outside of the program that have these opinions and want to destroy the guy and put him down. He's been through a lot. I know what it is that keeps him going. He's got that eternal drive to try to help people. As long as he can be in a position where he can impact young people and have an impact on the community, which him and his wife have done more for than any. Show me another coach at another school that has done the things that he's done at Iowa for the people. That stuff, I think, is why he does it. He doesn't stay because people pat him on. The athletic director came out and congratulated him. You want to talk about an uncomfortable dude? Ask coach to talk about his 200th win. The guy just won 200 wins. He's the second all-time leading coach in the Big Ten. He didn't want to say a thing about it. All he wanted to talk about was the team. And how many other coaches are going to sit up there and talk about themselves? That's not him at all.
It's clear that he is focused on building character of players and trying to do it the right way. I think he generally enjoys it. People keep thinking he's going to retire soon. I don't know. I think he could go another 10 years. He stays in shape. He likes doing it. He has that desire to do it for the right reasons. So why wouldn't you want to keep doing that?
I think he'll end up leaving on his own terms whenever he decides to leave. And shame on anybody that tries to push him out before that. Really, what it comes down to is what are the experiences that those guys are and how they feel about the program. You'd have to look, far and wide to find somebody with a negative experience. With the impact he's had on so many players over the years, how many years he's been coaching and how many players he's coached and how he's touched the lives of all those people. It's incredible. Him and Mary are involved in the community. The public only really knows a small fraction of what he does or what him and Mary do for the community. He'll never publicly admit the things he's donated or the people he's helped. He'd never talk about himself like that. There's a lot of people I know personally that he's touched their lives. He's gone out of his way to help other people that you never read about. In today's day and age, any idiot with a cell phone or a website can make a ridiculous comment about somebody they have no clue about. There's another 20 people that follow the idiot. It's just like, I get aggravated. I try not to read too many of those things because there's so many pissants and shoe clerks, quote Coach Fry, that never fired a shot, but I've always been proud to be a Hawkeye. It was hard to watch you guys play in those uniforms. They were probably the ugliest uniforms I've ever seen on a football team. Coach Fry must have had stock in the company or something. He had a student design the Tiger Hawk. He had a contest and got the trademark. Like anything with the Tiger Hawk, I don't know, he got something off of. Just like with Pony, people would say, why are we playing in ponies? Coach Fry owned part of Pony. So that's why we were playing in those ugly shoes that used to rip off in the middle of the game. Coach Ferentz, I've been happy and proud to say he's been a family friend for 30 plus years as far as character and stuff like that. He'll be a Hall of Fame coach. He'll probably have a statue somewhere and he won't ask for anything because not that kind of person. He's not about himself.